Okay, this presentation is going to be about meaning in medical issues and illness and dis-ease, which is a good way to say what disease is really a lack of balance and ease in the system. So I'm going to just go right to the slides. Okay. And as you know, if you're familiar with logotherapy, the tragic triad is made up of pain or suffering and guilt and death. These are the things that we cannot escape in life, and we have to learn to live with them. And so Frankl calls it the tragic triad. There are many emotions surrounding this. There are probably more that you could think of, but there's confusion and grief and anger and resentment, shame, rejection, fear and anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, feeling vulnerable, fragile, helpless, and insecure, isolated, lonely, disconnected, and misunderstood. So that's an awful lot to handle. And what do we do when we're feeling all of these turbulent emotions that are going through us? I want to start from, this is where we are, this is what we're experiencing, and how do we move from there into meaning without it being an artificial thing, without trying to say, oh, it's nothing, and minimize the fact that we're feeling what we're feeling. Okay. So our emotions tell us something about ourselves. They give us a message. And in logotherapy, we're always trying to hear the meaning. What is the meaning really? It's the message that you get from what's happening in your life. And you have a message from your emotions as well. So with the loss of meaning, people can develop a fatalistic attitude that breeds helplessness, frustration, and despair. There's a loss of control over your life. The belief, perhaps, that I'm unwanted and unloved. No one notices me. What did I do to deserve this? That kind of feeling. And why should I suffer? And why should I continue to live? It's just such a feeling of frustration of how do I even go on in my life when I'm dealing with this. So we've talked about all these turbulent emotions. And then what my emotions tell me is that I'm in a very challenging, difficult space. Okay, so how do I move forward from that place? So we have to understand that when we are experiencing some kind of illness, it's a loss of some sort, and sometimes multiple losses. For example, it could be a loss of a person in your life, a loss of a limb, loss of function, loss of autonomy, loss of relationships, loss of mobility, loss of creativity, loss of being able to live a pain-free life. And all of this loss is not just a loss of that specific thing that we've lost, it's a loss of meaning that comes with it, with every single loss. Because if you lose your autonomy, what does your autonomy mean to you? If you've lost, certainly if you've lost an important person in your life, what does that person mean to you? What does losing your creativity mean to you? Okay, so all of this loss leads us to look for meaning through attitudinal values, the attitude that we take towards what's happening. And Frankl said that when we suffer, there's actually something healthy in the experience of suffering. And that is that in suffering from something, we move inwardly away from it. We establish a distance between ourselves and whatever we're suffering from. We feel the sense of there's something that ought not to be. And in logotherapy, we say that the conscience recognizes what ought to be, and what ought to be is not something, a should, something that society is telling us about, or a family, or a religion, or anything. It's something that the conscience recognizes. It's the same thing here. The conscience recognizes that suffering ought not to be. Suffering is not the state of affairs that we should just accept as, yeah, it's fine, bring it on. No, there's something healthy about wanting to recoil from that experience. So Frankl says that suffering therefore establishes a fruitful, one might say revolutionary tension, in that it makes for emotional awareness of what ought not to be. Okay, and when you're feeling that distance between yourself and the situation that ought not to be, it causes you to want to do something about it. So it causes you to want to minimize or take away the suffering when it's possible to do that. And when it's not possible, it causes you to look for ways to find meaning despite that. So tragic optimism is the ability to take those 3 points of the tragic triad and transform them into something meaningful, which is easier said than done, but this is the basic structure. This is what we are looking to do in order to find a way to be optimistic despite the situation. So we see pain as an opportunity to grow spiritually. We see guilt as an opportunity to self-correct. We see death as an opportunity to embrace life. But we have to go further into how does that work exactly? So we have a meaning reframe. We go from what I expect from life to what life expects from me. And as you know, when you say, what does life expect from me? It's not as if life is an entity that's actually there talking to me, but Frankl does express it that way, because it's kind of like I'm in the world, I'm alive, my life has some kind of purpose to it. So there's an existential kind of expectation somehow that you could say, what I expect from myself, what do I think I need to be doing here? So you can reframe it as, well, this is what's happening to me, but what can I be expected to do with it? And you go from why me, which is a self-absorbed kind of state, into for whose sake do I want to do something? And the language of the spiritual unconscious is another kind of voice that speaks softly, and it says, my life does have value. I deserve to be cared for. So that flies in the face of all those feelings of nobody loves me, nobody cares, and I'm alone. And it contradicts that other voice. It says, say yes to life, meaning embrace everything that's happening, even though it looks like, how could I possibly want to embrace it? And we just said that we have to feel a tension between what is and what ought not to be. So, so between those two things, between feeling like this really ought not to be and feeling like, wait a minute, I really deserve a better life, then how are we supposed to embrace it? It's a really big challenge. But what logotherapy says is you embrace this as part of your unique journey. This is part of who I am, and I would not be who I am without this in my life. That takes a lot of growth to get there, but that's the orientation. And knowing that receiving, if you receive from others, you need help from others, that makes it possible for other people to give. So you're actually even giving when you're in a position of needing to receive. There are 4 different points that David Gutman brings out in his book, Finding Meaning in Life at Midlife and Beyond, Wisdom and Spirit from Logotherapy. He says that finding meaning in illness and loss comes through in four ways. A courageous attitude towards suffering is a human achievement. Just knowing that is a human achievement. Okay, and I actually saw someone who said that that was true, that he found meaning because of that one sentence in Man's Search for Meaning, that suffering can be a human achievement. Okay, this is someone who spoke at one of the Logotherapy conferences in Dallas several years ago when I was there, and he grew up in apartheid in South Africa, and he felt like his life was just a total waste and nothing but torture and nothing but suffering. His father died when he was very young because he was working in the coal mines, and his uncle one day gave him a book, Man's Search for Meaning. Gives him this book, and he says, "What do I need a book for? Like I need help with people." If people are beating me up or something, or if I need money, but like, what good is this book going to do for me? So he left it on the shelf for a long time. And then he said, after a while, he picked it up and he started reading it. And he read this one line: suffering can be a human achievement. He said, when he read that one line, he said to himself, wow, that means that I have achieved something in my life because I've suffered so much. And he went on to get 2 master's degrees and became a pastor and moved to Canada, and is very, very fine human being, I could see. So that's the attitude. Okay, then there's the meaning despite suffering, because yeah, I'm suffering, yeah, I'm in pain, but let me find meaning at the same time. Like together with this, there's also meaning I can find. Okay, or meaning through suffering. Sometimes the situation itself causes you to find meaning that you would not have found otherwise. Somebody can no longer work, and now that they can no longer work, they have stronger connections with their family, that they can do things that they never had time for. They never allowed themselves to have time for before. Okay, so that's another way. And adopting a healthy philosophical viewpoint, which helps carry the burden. So the philosophical viewpoint depends on the individual, but this is just in broad strokes. These are general, which I think are very useful general guidelines. So there's a call. If we say that you don't ask what you expect from life, but what life expects from you. So what are you being called to do when you're ill, when you're struggling with some kind of a medical situation? So there are many things that come to mind for me, and maybe there are more that you can think of. You treat yourself like someone who deserves to be cared for, right? Like you're caring for someone else. As if how would you care for this person? That's you, but how would you care for this person if it was someone else? Well, you deserve that care. Reaching out for help to others, and for social connections, responsible choices, making every moment count, seeking the root cause, which sometimes it's not easy to find, but just looking for it is what life expects. Listening to your own body and its signals, acceptance and courage, not to despair, and self-transcendence, to help others, to be a model for others, and to let everything serve a higher purpose, to just let this be an opportunity to grow, because that's what you're going through right now. So you might as well use it as an opportunity. And that's what you can always do. Everything is an opportunity to grow. And when you do that, you're really responding with a higher spiritual awareness, because you are not defined by your struggle. There's a book called Choose Life in Hebrew. It's actually in Hebrew. It's not in English. It's called Ubacharta B'Chaim by Rachamim Melamed, who had ALS. And all these points I took from that book, where he said the silence lets him think, how he can continue to enjoy life. That just because he has ALS didn't mean he has to stop enjoying life. And he can also continue giving pleasure to others. The importance of humor, the importance of expressing one's feelings, knowing that we cannot measure the quality of life, knowing that when nothing is left, the spirit remains. So this is a sentence that I really liked a lot, that he says there, someone who learns how to live also knows how to die. And someone who learns how to die also knows how to live. So that's really worth thinking about. I want to tell you about a student, one of my students in Istanbul, when I was teaching there. Her name is Gulsome, and she had a debilitating disease which caused her to lose her eyesight. And there's something else that she had. She had the defiant power of the human spirit. Her hospital room had a view that was overlooking the sea, and she didn't know why it looked so dark. She thought maybe the darkness would go away the next morning, but when she opened her eyes, she couldn't see anything. And the realization that she has lost her sight caused her great suffering. Actually, the doctors didn't even expect her to live. And, she had to, she was, it appeared, she hoped that she'd at least be able to live, right? And she loved to watch the nice views, the nature, stars in the sun, the faces of people around her. And she said, I stood silently and I hid under the sheet. I put my head on the pillow and I accepted that suffering. So the doctor said it was miraculous that she lived. And she said, there must be a meaning to my existence. There must be a way out. Each moment I spend in this life has great value. She believed that she would contribute something through her suffering, and she was determined not to die. She decided that she had two choices. She could reject the pain and spend her life complaining, or she could accept it. And she chose to accept it. That's all. She saw that she has two choices in front of her. And she knows what the choice of not accepting it would be like, and what the choice of accepting it would be like. And in fact, she did something else. She was helping people, counseling them, and especially using her, what happened to her, as a way of helping others. So there was someone that she was counseling who liked to go horseback riding, and now he couldn't do that anymore. But she said, wait a minute, you can, and I'll go with you. She didn't want him to feel like that pleasure was going to be taken away from him. So she went, even though she was afraid of animals, and she had never gone horseback riding before herself, but she went with him, and they did it in a way, I guess, that they didn't go too fast, and they did it, and and she was able to, it's something she was able to do for him, to go with him and accompany him on this. Okay. Now, what are the process that she went through? If we look at like a four-step kind of process that people go through. So first you have the overwhelming grief of losing her sight. Then you have the values that are underlying it, this belief that we should never give up. We should live life to the fullest. She said she was determined to live. It's a really strong value for her. And the threat of losing her life and losing her dreams, that was the meaning crisis. And then what was life asking her? What would it mean to not give up, to fight for her life? And that was when she asked herself those two questions. What is my choice? Am I going to give up, or am I going to choose to live? Then there's another story, another student from Sweden named Johan, and he lost a son. And so during the time that his son was sick, and also afterwards, he was in despair. And he said, gradually I realized, as I was thinking in despair, what could be worse than this? The thought came to me that only one thing could be worse, and that was not to have had Nils. And this thought filled me with tremendous gratitude. This insight of gratitude has carried me ever since. as the loss became brighter and more hopeful, and Nil's life instead felt so clearly meaningful. And for that, I often feel gratitude and joy. So the focus shifted from pain and loss to gratitude and joy, and to meaningfulness. I'm going to bring a Jewish source as well from a Torah source, where Rabbi Abram Isaac Kook talks about the blessing of vulnerability. And he says, illness reminds us of our vulnerability, which in turn removes our arrogance. It softens our stubbornness and refines our character. We are challenged to investigate and consider the moral intent revealed by it. There is no point in suffering, if not for some kind of ethical benefit that can be derived from it. And it is our task to find out what benefit we can derive. So you notice he's not saying at all that, oh, if you are sick, then you must have done something wrong, which people very often say, you know, what did I do to deserve this? You know, people, oh, God must be punishing me. He's not saying that at all. He's saying, as long as this is what's happening, you have to consider, you know, what it can do for you. What kind of growth can come out of it, right? So it's more than just accepting it and living with it and coping with it, but it's looking for how we can grow through it, and finding the benefit. You know, that, as I said, even though there are aspects to it that that we're always going to feel like it ought not to be, and it's not something we would ever ask for, but at the very same time, we can find benefits. So what kind of empathy do we have for the people around us as a person who doesn't have any kind of medical condition? Do we look around and notice the people around us to see how they're suffering? Do we believe in them? Do we feel compassion? How can we help them to discover what they can do and not just what they can't do? Can we imagine what it is like to be them? Can we be their advocate or be of help in some way? Do we applaud their achievements? Do we facilitate their ability to hear their conscience? These are all questions we can ask ourselves. And there's a quote that I want to bring you from Elizabeth Lucas, where she gives us the orientation towards meaning in suffering, in any kind of suffering, to see everything as a gift, right? That to believe in ourselves does not mean to make an arrogant claim that we can do anything, but knowing that we've been given exactly what we need to fulfill our destined tasks. This goes back to what I said before about seeing everything that's happening in your life as part of your journey, right? So if it's part of your journey, it's meant to be part of your journey, then that means you've been given exactly what you need. And if you've been given exactly what you need to fulfill your task, then what is your task, right? If you're starting from that assumption that you've been given what you need to fulfill your task, then that means it's up to you to figure out what you can do with that, what you can do with what you have. And she says, if a meaning in life truly awaits each person, then everything that we require for its fulfillment must lie in the cradle from the beginning. If an individual meaning of life awaits each person, then something different must lie ready in each cradle, a different supply of abilities, opportunities, health, and time. And she continues, and she says, the message that you are important, you are needed, all your experiences are important, even the painful ones, because they qualify you for a special task which only you can fulfill. can be communicated only in the context of a world perceived to have a meaningful structure, a world in which every person is specifically intended as a new hope, which arrives in the world like the dawn of a new day of creation in the history of the living. And I want to end with another Jewish source, which talks about overcoming despair. Rabbi Natan of Nemirov, who is the main student of Rabbi Nachman, he says the key to overcoming despair, and notice he says a strength which will especially be needed at this time in history when we are approaching the time of redemption. So this is very timely also. He says, is to look at our flaws and shortcomings in a different light. Because we're always looking at our flaws and our shortcomings when we're not doing the best in our health, right? That's what we naturally do very often. So instead of despairing over ourselves, we can be humbled while knowing that the God of compassion accepts even our smallest efforts. And then this feeling of lowliness turns into hope, knowing that we are doing our best and we are unconditionally loved. So I will stop the recording now.